welcome to Graphic Policy Radio. This is your host, Ilana Levin, aka Twitter's Ilana Brooklyn. And this episode of our podcast begins a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Actually, I just learned an amazing story, which was that a group of students actually got to see the original Star Wars movie in the theater with Allen Ginsberg and William H. Burroughs. And apparently at the end of the opening crawl, where, you know, it's like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, as soon as that line goes past, Ginsberg said aloud, "Oh, good, now I don't have to worry about it." And what made me think about that was how, if that's just not true. It is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but boy, we all do seem to be worried about it. Star Wars is just a juggernaut of modern culture and society. Myself being on the borderline of millennial and Gen X, like Star Wars was my childhood. I think I dressed up as Luke, and literally every photo taken of me below a certain age. I collected the Star Wars characters, action figures, even though my mom took their weapons away because violence is bad. And yeah, it was a huge mark of our childhood. And now it's also a huge part of an entire economy that sprung up around it, as well as a lot of really active fandoms, both in the forces of good and in the forces of evil. And so we're here tonight to talk about the most recent Star Wars movie, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. This episode is going to be just 100% spoilers because you're going to see the movie or you're not. And, you know, I understand wanting to listen to a podcast about the political subtexts of the film, even if you don't plan on watching it. But, like, chances are you're going to watch this movie. So here on be spoilers. And from here on be my amazing co-host for the day. Joining me is Portia Patterson-Hurst. Portia is the Public Opinion Research Associate for the Opportunity Agenda, a social justice communications lab in New York. She consults with allies in the field to identify and obtain pertinent research needs in the areas of immigration, criminal legal reform, and poverty. She's also the Director of Strategic Partnerships for Black Girls Create, and volunteers with the Harry Potter Alliance, and co-hosts Castle Black Pod, which is an awesome Game of Thrones podcast. Portia, welcome to the show.
Thanks. So glad to be on here today.
I'm glad we had the excuse to do this. We teamed up around Black Panther Fan Activist Con and hadn't had a chance to team up again, so this is exciting.
It feels like a yearly thing, so I'm with it.
Yes, there you are. And joining me for the first time is Raphael Shimonov, who is an artist and political activist from Queens. He was a HIAS refugee as a child from the Russian-dominated Uzbekistan. Shimonov serves on the executive board of Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, is co-founder of the Jewish Vote, and has worked with If Not Now, Michael Moore, and the Center for Constitutional Rights. His work has been covered by Rolling Stone, Newsweek, The Washington Post, Now This News, and Haaretz. He also just got Ellen DeGeneres actually held to account for siding with George W. Bush recently, which is an exciting moment. But I do want to shout out in particularly the moment in which Raphael and I both sang the Imperial March at Republicans who were going to a fundraising gala in New York on Star Wars Day. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was special.
It was like you and me and my baby brother who used to steal all my Star Wars action figures. And there's video of this, I think. But
they were literally going into an old battleship, right?
Yeah, they were going into the Dark Lord. They were to worship the Dark Sith Lord. And did make me think, I feel like we should just sing the Imperial March at fascists more often in protests. Well, I want to thank you guys for joining me for this show. This is a really exciting team up, and I want to start by just sort of asking, like, and I think this is a bit of a specific question with Star Wars. Did you enjoy watching the movie? What did you enjoy watching it, Portia?
Sure. I enjoyed like things going boom and being light or being dark or that sort of thing. The movie, like, as generally just like, oh, like as an experience to go out to the movies and go see a movie, which I don't do very often. It wasn't like, I didn't feel like I wasted my time or money going to go see a movie, and that movie being this movie.
Gotcha. Raph, what about you?
I did actually, until like the more I thought about it, the more upset I became. I actually,
Same.
yeah, I enjoyed being put in another world successfully, and like all of the just like everything about it, especially how they brought back things. But then thinking about things and actually logically going through things was very challenging for me. It was almost as if like an artificial intelligence wrote the movie, where it just like introduced certain things that it'll know. It'll get a rise out of me and then not actually explain it or have any kind of logical basis.
But your daughter had a great time though, right?
She loved it. It was our first Star Wars in the theater together, or even her first Star Wars in a theater.
Oh, wow. The thing that it really made me think about is, when I was a kid, like Princess Leia was this huge revelation, but like I didn't even want to be Princess Leia because she wasn't the protagonist. You know what I mean? And like kids who were sort of like really like not going to care about being or performing as an assigned gender role, like you're still going to just be like, well, I want to be the protagonist. And having Princess Leia be there at all as this like essentially self-rescuing princess who was just completely game-changing was still huge, especially for girls who might not have considered being, Luke Skywalker in telling their own stories. But being able to be a kid now and have Rey, and the narrative is telling you that, like, yes, she's the center of the story, like that is a really big thing.
I don't know. I might have the most outsider of perspectives in this, as I like did not get into Star Wars, honestly, truly did not get into Star Wars until Rogue One came out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like I've had friends who were very big Star Wars people, like as Star Wars was happening, like the prequels came out, and they were like, oh, you definitely have to see like the older ones, and then maybe that'll get you into it. Did not care about any of them. And then like my husband is a Star Wars person, so he loves them. We have to go see everything, which is fine, but I literally was nothing really captured my attention plot wise and like kind of took me on the journey until I saw Rogue One, and I was like, oh, if all the movies kind of get on this range, maybe I'll go with it. And they don't. And so like after seeing like all the other, I finished Rogue One and then went straight into A New Hope, what it leads into.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
And so I went in that order. I went through the original order, then I went through the prequels. And even in going in the order and all the hype that I had for Rogue One, I literally just like, I treat all the other Star Wars movies the same way. Like they don't capture me. Like even like the latest one, they don't capture me in the same way that Rogue One has. So in watching it in the theater, I was like, sure, it's fine. It's great.
It's interesting. Rogue One to me is like by far the greatest of the Star Wars movies from the relaunch. I mean, I recorded literally 2 full-length podcast episodes about how great Rogue One was. Like so much amazing storytelling and political work in it. But I definitely enjoyed The Last Jedi. The Rian Johnson, The Last Jedi, and obviously like the original 3 movies were like my childhood, right? But I don't know. I guess to me, I entered the movie theater this time, having heard not really that much in the way of spoilers, but having heard all of the critics that I knew being really disappointed in it, having a lot of feminists being like, this movie is really bad, me therefore being like, oh, I'm sure what's going to happen at the end is going to be Kylo Ren and Rey together in some way, because that would be the thing that would get people really upset. Also being pretty convinced there was going to be like a literal like look to the camera and say no homo moment from the obvious couple of Poe of Poe and Finn. But I mean, in the end, like some of my worst fears were realized and many of them weren't. It was kind of more of a mixed bag, and the whole thing was entertaining enough that I'm sitting in my seat and I'm enjoying it. And I'm feeling, I'm feeling like energized and intrigued, and I'm enjoying things. It's not till the very end that you're like, oh my God, where the hell is Rose Tico? And it's not till you begin thinking about it in a more critical light of like, oh my God, Rose Tico is missing because an organized group of like anti-women fascists protested and demanded her be taken out of the story. Then you're like, wow, that really does hang a damper over this movie from like an artistic and creative and like from a political standpoint. I mean, this movie could have really benefited from the wisdom of a brilliant mechanic who like would have represented the every person kind of voice, because Rose isn't from some magical Star Wars family. She's just a member of the rebellion, like kicking ass and being strong. And we didn't get to have any of that perspective, and we didn't get to have any of that representation and it's literally because fanboys complained. That is why Rose Tico is in less than 2 minutes of this movie.
It's kind of incredible how they just so blatantly were able to do that, and what it actually means. Because, I mean, like, the other thing that I really picked up on was how, just like Rose, Rey was also like not originally like bestowed with like some sort of bloodline that made her powerful, that she was an example of like how anyone could like achieve kind of, you know, the Force, and in a good way, or Jedi. And then how they just completely took that away and like, hey, surprise, she's royalty. So like it kind of like the whole thing kind of like stepped back a lot of things from the previous. And was that a commercial decision? If so, that's really, really sad.
I strongly suspect it is a commercial. Well, with Rose Tico, we know that is a commercial decision that was driven by organized hate mongers. With making Rey be a Palpatine, that's more of a mixed bag, I think. I can't quite literally say we can tie this particular artistic choice to this particular outcome. Like, I can imagine J.J. Abrams being the kind of guy who likes to have power be bestowed hereditarily. I mean, after all, he literally gave his son a job writing Spider-Man at Marvel with zero qualification. But but again, like, my expectation of how that would be handled was so low going into the theater. I was relieved that it wasn't that Rey wasn't literally like the child of Anakin or something. Like, right. I was relieved to find like having her be a Palpatine. At least you have a message where they're saying no one is born evil. You know, just because your dad is evil or grandpa's evil doesn't mean you're going to be evil. But it would have been way better if she'd been as she'd been written in the Rian Johnson version of the movie. It would have been better to have her be a nobody. I absolutely agree. And
more in line with that wonderful ending with like, just like, oh, who's that fleet? And I forget what the line was. It was
it's the best. That's not a navy. That's just people. I want, like, I know, like, Star Wars protest signs are seen as tacky by some people, but, like, to me, that's, like, the Star Wars protest sign from this movie. That line is wonderful.
I loved it so much. I loved, like, I think that the sad thing about it, though, as well, was people keep talking about, and I love being on Twitter and seeing people's reactions on Twitter, talking a lot about how it doesn't make any sense how we have that large group of people amass magically whenever Lando goes against them, but like for whatever reason they weren't available whenever Leia called out to them in the last movie. And I wonder a lot about that. I'm like, where have these people been? Because like after watching the movie and then like the people not appearing whenever they were called, I was wondering, I'm like, what is the rebellion just this like ragtag group of people? And I think that's my main issue with the movies, is that I feel about the movies, and granted, like, Star Wars is not my primary fandom, but one of my primary fandoms is Harry Potter, and I feel about the Star Wars movies the way I feel about Harry Potter movies, wherein they just have a lot of plot that they cannot fit on the screen, so they end up like making a story out of what story they can make a story out of when it's like a huge epic they're trying to pull a story out of. And I wonder a lot about the people, like, who are the people who could be part of the rebellion but aren't, and like who received the message the first time around? Why did this whole like large like people navy come out of nowhere? Where were they before? Did they just not get the message? Like, what's going on with that group? And I wish we knew more information about that, like had that perspective presented to us.
I feel like that had also the markings of like a Disney AI type of writing, because it was just like every great movie has that surprise like group of people joining out of nowhere, and it's completely illogical how they appeared. But in this case, like, there's so much story before then that had to explain that and didn't.
Can we, I mean, while we're on the subject of illogical groups of people, this is really, like, because honestly, it bothered me the whole time in a movie when it happened, every single scene. Who were those Sith in the freaking auditorium or the stadium while Palpatine was, I was like, what the F are those? And my husband's theory is that they're clones, but I'm like, what is going on? What is this?
That's a good theory. your husband's theory sounds pretty legit. I also think that it's a question of like, they could have been projections. They could have been Force ghosts of past Sith Lords, you know, like it, or they could have been sycophants who just really wanted to be Sith and were just like people who had terrible values, you know. I don't know. It could be definitely any number of things. I did like the visual of Snoke having literally just been grown in a vat.
Yeah.
And you just see this pickled Snoke body.
And there were like 3 of them. There were like 2 more. I was like, oh, like it could be another Snoke in a minute. Beyonce, you know, like
apparently,
I can have you in a minute.
Apparently the economy is really bad because now they're like putting multiple Snokes in one can.
Oh God! I mean, I like this. I like the subtext of like, we're just going to manufacture other just like evil dudes because they're just a dime a dozen, and like he doesn't have some great big mystery, and he's not some amazing guy. I just cooked him up in a lab, and he's just literally a puppet of evil.
Yeah, he just is like he's no one special.
Yep. I mean, the whole puppet metaphor was really strong around, and there's things the movie just did do good. Like I thought the puppetry metaphor around what you have with Palpatine's return was, you know, really powerful. He's showing all of these people think that they're going to actually be able to control the Empire, and he's behind it, and he's like the puppet master. But then you look at his body, and it's revealed of this horrific machinery behind him. He can barely keep his own body animated, and the idea of like, you know, of it literally being Palpatine returning in the end did have like a particular sort of, you know, in every generation, like from a sort of like Jewish perspective for me, like, yes, the specific in every generation, you have to remember that the cycle of evil could repeat itself and da-da-da-da. So I had no problem with that choice. I'm not convinced that when they entered the new trilogy, people were like, oh yes, Palpatine is back. Because they certainly didn't seed Rey's origin that much, but the decision to have it be Palpatine is back, I think, is a reasonable thing to say about the way, you know, some of these cycles are hard to end, and that these fascist evil motherfuckers never fully go away.
I didn't love it because I think it kind of had the opposite effect for me. Like Palpatine, they're evil, and I get it. Like the evil of like the same kind of fascism or whatever, and the same kind of like logic, like. For like, and you know, the main series does make a lot of allusions of the of Nazis for the order and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So if that's the illusion of like these are like fascists and they are extremists and this is just like who they are and they have a command where they're just like taking over the universe. For me, it didn't really hold that same kind of like, you don't have to have the same literal evil every time. It always does, like, it represents itself differently each time to me. Like, people, I think that's how people get signed on to it, because at first they're coming into it like, it's not the same old thing, you know, this is the new kind of fresh kind of fascism. Like, get in with the group, join the bandwagon. And it's whenever they're in it longer, they're seeing it actually being the same old thing. But it kind of like appeals to them differently, which I guess is kind of, if you have Snoke as the like mouthpiece, I guess it did present itself to them that way. But it still kind of was, it felt kind of like a cop-out for me a little bit, that it was the same old person and not some new person with a whole different like thought exercise about how they're going to do the same thing.
It's a really useful parallel when we watch on social media or anywhere where people come upon a new fascist, and when other people raise alarms, frontline communities raise alarms, they're like, well, this person's different because that's not exactly the same as the last fascist. So it's this constant game of like, every fascist has to be exactly the same for us to learn about fascism and prevent it.
Well, one thing I loved, actually, was the whole Hux being the traitor thing, and that he was entirely motivated by pettiness, but also by, like, I think there was a split between, like, the people who are sort of the religious fundamentalists, spiritualists, like Sith people, and the sort of people who are part of the machinery of the fascist state, and that discomfort with each other, like, is something that you've seen, right, in actual, like, we saw that, like, in the actual Third Reich. You had, like, some people believed in weird witchcraft, I don't want to call it witchcraft, but, like, weird mythology, and other people were like, we just want to steal Jews' money and kill people.
Right.
And so, like, that weird tension, and I was like, that rang true to me, and I was glad it wasn't a leader of the fascists defecting because he was great. It was like literally just petty, and that felt very believable to me.
Yeah, I love that. I was like seeing like the inner, like if we're gonna keep with like, you know, the Third Reich illusions or whatever. Like, it's like seeing Goebbels and the other like First Command like being in their own little petty squabbles with each other, rather than it being like some like, oh no, it's a redemption arc, which, you know, we get from another character, and it's like, I don't want redemption, I just want them to be the awful people they are.
So tell me your thoughts about the redemption arc of Kylo Ren / Ben Solo. It's so sad, it's for me, that this is what we got, because of the whole, like, I understand, like, if we're going back to the, like, question of, like, is it a commercial decision? Was this kind of, like, something that they saw a lot of people who are consumers might be interested in, and then they, like, kind of gave in to that thought? Mm-hmm. I could see that they did that, but I don't understand why that was a choice. There were people who were also calling for Storm Pilot, and they didn't do that, and that's the worst thing to not do. There's actually set up for that. There's also chemistry between those two people, and there's not. But in my perspective of that, it's like an abusive kind of relationship, and he had plenty of times where he could have chosen to be taking the road to redemption, and he did not. And then to kind of put it onto, well, his mother passes away, and then he kind of gets a change of heart, perhaps her change of heart or whatever, because she's passed away. So that helps to make him Ben, to identify as Ben, who she made him, rather than Kylo Ren, which is his own imagination, and now he's going to be better. I just hated it. It was great. I was just like, I just was kind of resigned in a theater, like, sure, fine, great, yep.
But it's just like, how many mistakes and how many evil deeds and how many like planets destroyed can one like white dude get away with? And then the moment he shows like not even regret, because I never saw regret, but like more like, hey, I like this better. And then everyone's like cheering at like this person's change of heart. I didn't see any regret or real change of heart other than just changing his actions, but not ever really redeeming himself, not ever really going through like realizing what he had done throughout his life at all.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And my theater, we literally booed when they kissed. Like, my theater booed.
Wow.
Not like every single person rang out in boos, but like I heard boos throughout the audience around that. And that was the only thing that got boos in the whole movie.
I heard a couple of people clap, and then I think because it was like probably like 2 or 3 people, and then because I heard the rest of the crowd not clapping, they stopped really quickly. And I was like,
so
this is, I don't know who these people are, but if I saw you clapping, I would be giving you the evil stare, like, what is wrong with you?
So many people clapped in my theater, and that might have to do with how there were like visible Trump supporters in my theater cheering that, but also cheering the rebellion, like the resistance, like not knowing that, dude, this is about you. Like, you're not the resistance here.
But that kind of like plays into the like underdog thing, right?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that's one of the challenges with Star Wars, is like you have these signifiers that are so broad that people who, it's clear if you understand the text, are absolutely the bad guys, still can't see that's them. Like, they don't have the "are we the baddies," revelation, because like, and the thing is, there's bits of that around the edges, right? Like, you do see stormtroopers going and ripping children from people's homes in this movie, but it's all just hit on so quickly before jumping around to the next thing that it doesn't even get a moment to sit and be like, look at the Empire doing family separation and stealing children, and it's like there and it's gone, and it's there and it's gone.
But then at the same time, I think that's why I feel like I wish we could see more about the people, like just general people thing, because I think that a lot of people put on this, like, in real life, they put on this air of like, well, it's not me. I'm not the one going and literally ripping people's children from their arms, and I'm not the one who's doing these things. And if it's being done, and I'm not the one who's on the first point of contact for that, then it's not my fault. And then actually being actively talking against it could be an issue, because then people in my community will look at me funny for being an activist about it. So I'm just not going to be active about talking about it, and I'm not going to like feel bad about this being done because it's not me. It's kind of like removing themselves from it in a way. And I think that if we saw that, it would kind of give us, I feel like it would be a better introduction to like what is your role as a general person in this system?
Yeah. We needed more of that. And we had hints of this with, for example, when they come across the other group of former stormtroopers who had run off and deserted. And like, they meet Janna, who is like the first named black woman in Star Wars of the main trilogy. Like, there was the woman, you know, Thandie Newton, who gets like offed in, you know, Solo. It's just ridiculous. But like, you know, you meet Janna and you meet the other stormtroopers who've broken off, and it's like, it could have been this, and it was the beginning of something really awesome. And I, you know, it would have been, how cool would it have been? And this is somebody said this on Twitter, but like, how cool would it have been if they had said, oh, well, we heard about Finn and like how he had abandoned and joined the rebellion, and we were inspired. And I mean, there is something cool with having them just sort of realize themselves on their own, which is sort of how I felt in theater. Like, oh my God, they like came to the stormtroopers came to this conclusion themselves. Like, this is ridiculous. We are defecting. But it would have been also, you know, another way to really expand on the importance of Finn would be to have the other stormtroopers sort of realize that, I don't know, there was something there that they could have done more with.
Or, like someone else has mentioned on Twitter, have Finn's plan to be to get all of the troopers to rebel, and not just, you know, like he hear from Janna that like there is a small group that did it, and he'd be like, if a small group can do it, I can spend my time here trying to get the rest of them to do it, you know?
Yeah, that would have been so good.
Oh my God.
Him going to chase off after Rey to save her in a circumstance where he actually could not have been helpful in the slightest, and then just scream a lot was it was very frustrating. I will say that the opening scene of him and Poe in the Millennium Falcon, just like in their space battle escaping, was fabulous. It was really, really well shot and their chemistry with each other is so good. Their dialogue with each other was so good. It was such a sheer pleasure to have Poe and Finn in that little space escape going back and forth with their banter. Their banter is always so good with each other. And like, you know, as a result of them having such amazing chemistry and Oscar Isaac's clear and expressed decision to play it as a romance, which he will tell you in every interview, I had entered the movie theater thinking that in order to counter this, Disney was going to like literally have them look into the camera and be like, I'm sure glad I'm straight, heterosexual high five, look at the camera, no homo. And the thing is, I think that Disney thinks that they did a no homo, but like to any kind of vaguely sensitive audience, it's very clear that there is nothing contradictory to them being in love in this final story. Like, oh, we meet Poe's ex, so he sort of is flirty with. Yeah, that happens. We have messy breakups and exes. He used to date a woman. Yeah, so did a lot of us, right? Like,
or also
it's okay.
like, what is their sexuality can be many sexualities, like where they can like be into any gender. Like, it doesn't matter.
But I feel like that's actually pretty crafty of like them, because it's like a Bill Clinton speech where everyone is in the room getting what they need from it, and it's completely different conclusions. And Bill Clinton said one thing, and it's just like the same kind of crafty, sneaky kind of writing that is going to let different audience members walk away with what they want to see. Like, and then what you said about how these interviews, and this is a theme with this film in particular, there were so many interviews that I went back to look at where they were promising so many different things that it's becoming very clear that they did walk back a lot of things that might make it controversial on Twitter because of those mobs and the toxic mobs. Like, there was this statement, I forget who it was, but it was very clear, for example, that Rose would be much more integrated into the film and key to collaborating with Rey, and then it didn't happen. And then there was another comment on an interview where there was going to be this big like LGBTQ kind of confirmation, and instead we got like just two people like celebrating like they do in New Year's anywhere, who could be straight or gay or what. Like, it's just like, it seems like I said in the beginning, like it's just like some asshole AI wrote this.
I mean, I am proud of the fandom for not letting like this throwaway kiss between two basically unnamed women characters in the background be regarded as a as a victory. Like the media, the non-fan driven media has tried to make it a thing, and fandom has been like, no, this is not representation. This is nothing. This is crumbs. Fuck this. And I'm very proud of people for standing by that. But as I watched the end of the movie, I thought to myself, in 30 years, if the world is still standing, any kid who's watching this conclusion of the film is going to be like, oh, and Finn and Rey and Poe got married and lived in a triad, and it was really sweet. Because it's all in there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, it's the heterosexism of society at large that sort of makes you read things in a particular way. But you're right. I like the Bill Clinton speech metaphor is quite amazing. The thing also at the end that I really was, Portia, I was hoping that you could tell me some thoughts about was like when you have Lando having his conversation with Jannah, who is the woman who is the lead former stormtrooper who helps them, and is like the only black woman character of significance in these last three movies. Like when you saw them talking, like I felt like this feels like something, and I'm happy about this. Like are they going to have a spin-off where she and Lando are going to go and find her family together? I felt like it was like, I don't know. I felt big to me, but I'm like, I don't know. I'm not a black person. Who the fuck am I to project this significance onto it? So I don't know if you have thoughts.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to, I see this whole series and I want to see spinoffs for almost everything that I feel like I didn't get enough of, right? I want to see Rose Tico go on a journey and figure out what to do like after everything is over, and like to do like kind of grow after her sister's death, and how she reconciling with that, and where's her family, like who's out there, who's left after she loses this major person in her life. I want to see that. And then like with the Jannah Lando conversation, like again, being the kind of like the perception I have of watching the movies and kind of like not being like awed by them, like I did really enjoy the points whenever Lando came in, but they also felt very like few and far between. So it's very little like lead black character like discussion and like stuff going on, because he was like very little like in the series. And so like seeing him again in this, I enjoyed the scenes that he had. And then whenever he stopped to talk to Jannah, I was like, okay, this is going to be an interesting conversation. We finally have the two black characters together to have a conversation. And they talk about and not like Finn, because Finn is like these are two side characters. And that's an interesting thing too. Like Finn, I think that I wish the conversation had been between Jannah, Finn, and Lando, because those are Finn is also a former stormtrooper, and he also has family that may still exist and he just doesn't know. And I'd want to see a spinoff with Finn, Jannah, and Lando in discussion, because I feel like I want to know what Lando's background is that he feels like impacted enough to talk to Jannah about having this journey and about helping her and others like her to find their families. And it kind of feels like like Lando's offering himself to kind of be like Lewis Henry Gates Jr., like finding your roots. Like he's offering this to Jannah and other stormtroopers.
Wow. I love that. What did you guys think about the revelation that Poe had been a drug runner before he joined the rebellion?
Yeah, I feel like it was just like very heavy-handedly throughout the whole movie, trying to make that point that no one is beyond redemption, which is a powerful point if made correctly. But sometimes it's made sometimes it's made in a way where it just allows like this kind of instant forgiveness versus like accountability.
I know that like DJ Ben Hameen, who is one of the runner, like he runs For All Nerds, he co-runs For All Nerds with Tatiana King-Jones, and I have the Castle Black podcast on there. I know that he felt a way about it. He was like, oh, okay, it's kind of like they're not thinking about the overtones of like making the Latinx man a drug runner. And I was just like, oh yeah, that's an oversight. But it was also kind of like, I don't know, I'm kind of aware of like, okay, that might be a missed like thing that they should have thought better of doing, but at the same time they did make other characters like Han Solo, like he smuggled a bunch of stuff too, and I'm sure some of them were drugs. So I wasn't necessarily like put off by it, but I also was like, it just, again, it felt like just a throwaway kind of thing rather than making it like a full conversation about different characters' stories and backgrounds. And I don't think it really added anything to the conversation. Like, he could have just been, this could have been a group of friends that he fell out with for some dumb thing or whatever a while back. It didn't necessarily have to be because he was like smuggling anything at some point. Like, find another plot line for your main characters.
It felt like it was just for a joke. Yeah.
I mean, what did you feel about them having Zori just be in a mask and in a uniform the whole time? It was a great mask outfit, by the way.
It really was. Well designed.
Every time they invent a new female character, I'm like, great, there's a little bit more of this or that. Well, actually, I'll tell you, the new character that I feel most strongly about, I'm sure is not going to come as a surprise to anybody, but Babu Frik is my oldest friend, and I would kill for Babu Frik. Like, I haven't been this taken by a puppet since the introduction of Gritty. And granted, Gritty was pretty recent, but like, I really love a lot of Muppets. And, I was so taken by how charming and adorable and well performed Babu Frik was that I didn't really think about it too much until, I did think about it at the time. And yet I was still so overwhelmed by the cuteness of Babu Frik that like I was thinking about, you're having C-3PO, who is basically a person, having his humanity being ignored for the sake of using his translation skills and risking his cognition, risking his mind, saying, like, look, we have to hack into your brain. We think we can bring your personality back, but it's possible we might not be able to. Please sacrifice yourself for the greater good. Pressuring C-3PO into doing it, and then rather than like letting that have gravity, having it being undermined by the instant hilarity and adorableness of Babu Frik, who is my oldest friend. So I don't even know how to feel about that, because I feel really strongly about the importance of like treating droids as people, basically, in this context. And I love Babu, but that was kind of troubling. What do folks think?
For me, I was just like reminded of like the importance of like tech workers in like resistance, right? That's what he kind of represented for me. And it was like the singular vision, like skilled person at the, who's able to kind of shift gears quietly behind the scenes that like we're trying to build here today, where, if we had enough of them wake up, they could stop like deportations, they could stop child separation, they could stop mass incarceration, or even just slow it down when things go a little bit, when they start to like realize and actually have leverage over policy. And for me, he was just like this little reminder of how you could do it. But I didn't get to the point where I'm like feeling. I think I was more distracted at that moment by just, again, through the whole film, not being able to simmer on anything, where a profound thing happened and then we just move on to the next, or it's like nullified by a joke or something.
Yeah. I think it's sort of like a fetch quest at times, the way it feels, like from a video game standpoint. Yeah,
and it was unfortunate because I feel like there are a lot of points where you could have just sat there and been like resonated with what was happening. Even meeting Jaina, I feel like if we just had a little bit more time to kind of get an understanding for like what was going on, like so for this instance, whenever C-3PO like kind of like disregarded his humanity or droidanity, I think that it was kind of like, it just didn't, I understand that he annoyed, I didn't feel like they were the group to decide. It was on C-3PO to decide whether or not he was going to do it, like, consent. But also, like, they're not the group that's been with him since the beginning of his journey. Like, that was Leia, that was Luke, that was Han. And I understand that they're gone now, but that also, it didn't really... Of course, it was a group that was with him for the least amount of time that was ready to just lay his like thoughts on the table because they hadn't gone through those journeys with them. So I kind of like took that being the like thing of like they don't really have a connection with him in the way that like he's been connected to all his life, and they don't know all the journeys that he's been on, and they should have respected that. and they didn't. And that kind of, but I understood that they wouldn't understand it because they were not with them. So it's kind of like a tangled edge. Like, I get why they're doing this. Like, it's within character, but it's also awful and crappy that they're doing this.
Yeah. And I hope people sort of have that realization as they watch and think about the movie. But, you know, a really wonderful tender droid moment was when you had BB-8. You know, BB-8 watches Rey use her powers to heal the giant serpent, which also feels like super biblical. And then you have the BB-8 goes and uses his little powers to zap the little sad droid who looked like a smoke detector / mouse back to life.
Oh my
droid is called D-O. D-O. Oh my god! And then that's the, you know, the tiny little sad droid who, like, when people approach it, it's like, no, thank you, bye. And it's like, it just conveys everything about like an abused pet that's so scared to like interact with people. But he's clearly, this droid begins to heal and do better, you know. And I'm so glad they rescued this droid. But I just thought it was really nice that BB-8 rescues it, and, like, you know, it's like learning from Rey and goes out on a limb to try to save this tiny little vulnerable creature who ends up, you know, being a you know, part of saving the day as well. But is also a smoke detector. But yeah, I mean, you know, actually another good bit of, I guess, this is probably CGI and not Muppetry, but the when they go to the Burning Man planet and you see a play, again, more example, it's like not just a play, I think it was like a puppet show because of all the puppet metaphors, a puppet show about, gosh, I should have checked to see what the puppet show was about, but you see some children of that particular alien species watching a puppet show, and you get to see these little children laughing, and it just really suddenly gives you into these stakes of how important it is for this planet that our heroes are visiting to not just get blown up by a Death Star in the process of them just being there, you know, and like that planet is, because our heroes visited it, is like, then it gets targeted by the stormtroopers.
I guess for me that moment was sitting with my daughter during that moment. She's 10 recently, and like I often disregard a little bit when fandom goes really hard on like canon and things like that, and but it kind of like made me understand it a little more, because that was like this, obviously maybe some sort of oral tradition being conveyed to the next generation, and these kids are having a great time watching it, and then just like watching my daughter watching that and just realizing Star Wars is part of a oral tradition, and now understanding a little bit more of how people are on the ones that are on the justice side of it are actually like really concerned about like the things that get conveyed to the next generation, even if they don't think of it that way, if they're thinking of it like as protecting what they found or what changed the way that they're thinking about life. Like I actually like had to pause and just be like, oh wow, you were kind of a dick to people who are really taking this very seriously, because part of it is.
Yeah, I was talking earlier, so I've because I was having this complaint with my husband about like, oh, the movies, I really don't like, I only love Rogue One, what's going on, and so we've been watching The Mandalorian, and he was like, oh, we should get into like the animated series, you'll like those, to kind of have a bit more depth and stuff to them.
They're good.
Yeah, we started it today. It started with Clone Wars, the more animated one, and then I'm gonna work on the actual like 2D one soon. But I was looking at and watching these like series and trying to get more of the canon or whatever. I was having this like thing where I was just like annoyed that there's a lot of like bipedal like aliens, and I understand why that is. Like, okay, you need actors to play these like aliens, and these aliens have to look like humans somewhat because that's who the actors are. But I'm like, I feel like there needs to be a better representation of having empathy and sympathy with aliens that do not look anything like humans. And I really enjoyed that this planet was a little bit better represented of like people who look nothing like you, but you need to care about these people. You need to care about what happens to them and what's happening here.
Absolutely.
What did you guys feel about the ending of Palpatine being like, yes, you need to strike me down in anger and then you'll get my powers. When, he probably actually would just take over her body or whatever. But like, and then the question of like, there's always some Sith Lord telling some young person to strike them down in anger to come into their full evil Sith Lord powers, and there's a question of like, is fighting them with violence like actually the solution that they should be doing? And didn't she end up killing him through violence anyway? So, but it was just that she wasn't angry enough. I don't know. I guess I have questions around like the philosophy of the conclusion of the story, like how we're supposed to be taking her getting 2 lightsabers and like forcing an X of power back into his body / winning a fight. I don't know.
Yeah, I am trying to understand more about Star Wars. I've been watching a lot of stuff on like the dark side and the light side and like how they work, because my main argument is I don't understand this whole have to be on the light side and not use any emotion and disentangle yourself with the world and kind of be above it all, versus being on the dark side and being a Sith and actually giving over to being emotional and using the emotion to do things, and making it seem as if they like the two cannot be intertwined. And so like whenever, and that's why I feel like it was like, it's enjoyable to watch the movies. Like whenever Rey first used the lightning to like take down that cruiser, I didn't think anything of it. I just thought that she was like, I just thought of her awakening a power within herself or whatever, that she can reach out and use force lightning. I didn't think anything about like, what does force lightning signify? Is that aligned with a certain group or not? Like I was just like, oh, force lightning, cool. And my husband was like, well, oh no, that shows that she's like, she can be dark. And I'm like, I don't get it. So when it came down to Palpatine being like, strike me down and that's going to be the way that you take it, I was like, I honestly felt like she could use righteous anger and it still would be the same thing to me. Like, would it not be of the balance? Would you not still be using the force? Would you not be part of the whole alignment? You're not like taking yourself out of the spectrum. You're still within the spectrum of the force. And why don't we see more like gray Jedi or gray whatever force users? So for me, like Rey is in the gray, and like her taking him out with or without using her, like there's no way she's going to be able to get rid of Palpatine without using the force. So it may as well be like align herself with the grayness of it all.
It's interesting. Like I think that the prequels, which I like didn't enjoy but understand certain things about, the prequels and then The Last Jedi, both were movies that were like asked the question of like, actually maybe the Jedi were kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
Like, maybe the Jedi fucked up the young people in their program. Maybe even though they were well intentioned, the end result was still destructive and hurtful to people. And like being able to critique that system it was an important development, I think, for the story. And then to have that get dialed back largely and have it go back to just like the Jedi are good and the Sith are evil is a little bit infantilizing and a loss, I guess. I mean, I think one of the things about the prequels is that, the Star Wars original trilogy, right? Like, are very much about, here's this hero's journey story that's foregrounded by this one individual person, and it's about an individual person who then, gets his Magnificent Seven together, but like that bring down an empire, and it's about the strength of individuals to make change. And, the difference between that and like Star Trek is all about systems. It's all about groups of people. It's all about developing an order of people and like working together and like achieving a goal collectively. And Star Wars is much more individual as a story. And then the prequels sort of tried to bring in a little bit more of this like systemic analysis, and just they, for a number of reasons weren't super successful in the eyes of most people of my generation. I get that the kids like it because that was what they had when they were younger, but like sand, it just gets in things. It's just not good dialogue and really needs to be forgotten. But and then in the current movies, this sort of, I think it was a question of, are we going to talk about groups and systems, or are we going to still have it just ultimately be all about the individual again? And I think Star Wars ultimately wants to be a story about about individuals, and so that's what it does. So, like politically, I want to say, like, I wish the ending had been all about Finn like organizing working and to organize with the stormtroopers to liberate themselves, and like the armada of independent soldiers coming in, and like, but that's just Star Wars just doesn't do that. That's just not Star Wars. It'd be awesome if it was, but it's not. I don't know. That was my big meta read of Star Wars versus Star Trek, at least.
I love it. I actually just imagined like Star Trek institutional San Francisco versus like Star Wars Texas style like happenings.
Oh yeah. Whew.
Which I think a lot of, actually, like, in a gross way, I remember, I think, Steve Bannon praising Star Wars over Star Trek for that very reason, that he saw it as some sort of libertarian, like, ideal, like, versus this kind of thing that still has some sort of, like, institutional, like, sound kind of organizing.
I can believe it. I honestly come away from the Star Wars series, like, and I understand people like have this is like a primary fandom and people are really into it, but I guess like being an adult and fully realizing like all the like political aspects of things and being a very systems thinker, watching Star Wars just doesn't do it for me, because I'm just like, I feel like they don't care about the people enough, and where are the people?
Yeah. I mean, what happens at the end, Rey collapses the Sith for sure, and they blow up all of these machines of war for the new for the First Order. But what happens to all of the evil Nazi commanders who weren't in that immediate location? Like what's going to happen with the people who were part of the fascist apparatus, who were not like immediately blown up then and there? Like those are stories that maybe will get told in some other way. But I think that those things can't just be forgotten or ignored. I liked one of the things I've enjoyed about Mandalorian, which we're going to cover on the podcast soon, was that you do sort of see like these random pockets of evil assholes, right? Like still there, even if they're not being like, it's not like they just disappeared or like suddenly everything's healed. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that like even for like a general overarching kind of thing of like, if everyone is very into what's going on with the Force, like who were the people on the Force, we have Finn, who is Force sensitive. We don't see anything going on with that. We'd love to see what's going on with that. But what does that mean if the Sith are gone? They're obliviated. Palpatine is gone. He was the main leading it. Everything that he was building is gone, as far as we know. Kylo Ren is gone. So where's the balance? Who's balancing out the Force right now? Is it solely Rey? Is she enough in the gray where she is the balance? And then what happens when there's other Force users who come into their own being and power? And what is that struggle? So I wonder a lot about like, what is the story they're trying to tell about, like, if we're going to talk about individual story, what are we talking about when it comes to the balance of the Force? Because they didn't really give us like a really clear idea of like what they feel of what is a balance look like in this world.
Right. That's a great point. And I also like sort of shuddered when I heard the term a Force dyad being invented for this. Like, it just gave me a rash. But yeah, I think those are really good questions, Portia. One thing I really did like about the ending, though, was having the closing be Rey visiting Tatooine and burying Luke and Leia's lightsaber in the sand. And you have this moment of her, like, sort of sledding down a sand hill. And, like, the first time you ever get to see her really feeling like she has any sort of freedom and childhood as a person is just doing that sledding and then burying those razors. I'm very curious who the elderly woman is who asked her who she is. And I do like Rey taking on the Skywalker name and like sort of how that combines to make it like she's not the last Skywalker because of how she was born. She's the last Skywalker because that's her family of choice, because she's Leia's protege ultimately, right? And I thought that was sweet.
I thought that Rey should have walked out with like one name, Madonna, Beyonce status. Like, my name is Rey. I own this now. Before I was upset about not knowing now I know what my heritage is. I'm fine. It's cool. I don't need it. I'm just Rey. Simply Rey.
Yeah.
Sorry. What did you guys think of the quick flash to seeing Leia in the flashback fighting with a lightsaber and training with Luke? Like, I just kept thinking, like, if you're going to do that, which you should have done that, like, we don't really get to have it. There's no explanation as to why. There isn't a satisfying explanation in canon as to why she would train as a Jedi and then not actually do much with that beyond it. It's, you know, I'm glad they had Leia use the Force in the earlier movie. I felt like that was really powerful and deserved, but... And if it's cool to see her and know that she had a lightsaber. I don't know. Any thoughts, guys?
Yeah, my thought was like very much like yours. Like, how nice that you added this here when she didn't actually ever do it. Great, fantastic. I feel like that should have. I'm like, if you're gonna do it in in a series spinoff or something. Young Princess Leia. Let's do that. I don't want to see this. And I also just was like, I feel like it was kind of awful to do it after the actress, like after Carrie is gone, because it's like, she should have had the ability to do that. That's something she earned, and it's unfair that she gets this posthumous like use of the lightsaber. She earned that usage, and I don't think it was fair to do that.
Yeah, that's legit. I think the movie did do a good job of working in the little old footage they had and have it not just like super scream like this actress died before we could make this movie. Like, I feel like they did about as good a job of that as you could possibly do, I guess.
It was very like Fast and the Furious post Paul Walker was like, I can kind of see moments where I'm like, you're using old footage, but other times I'm kind of okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I at least that was how I felt. And it made me really, we really, like, for folks who don't know, like, Carrie Fisher did tons of script doctoring on all the movies that she worked on there. And, like, we have the character of Princess Leia is to, like, her credit. Like, she made this, like, important feminist sci-fi hero. And it is sort of, it feels weird having her just sort of exist outside of Carrie Fisher the person anymore. Do you know? Yeah. But you know what I really liked, though? I felt like in this movie, Chewbacca was really given his due respect, and that he hadn't really been regarded as a full and equal human before. So as others have pointed out, like, Chewbacca's race, the Wookiees, are much more long-lived than humans. So technically speaking, Han was Chewie's pet, right? And I think, like, and I don't just mean that this was the movie where Chewbacca got treated like an equal because he got the medal finally. Like, I don't think that was it. I think it was the way other people regarded him and looked to him like a respected elder. Like, I felt like it was finally the movie that did that, which felt good.
And just like how he was the most human of everyone in terms of how we react to people dying. Yeah. That was incredible. Yeah, that's really true. Or the most Chewy.
The most Chewy. I was not expecting seeing Luke return the way he did. Mark Hamill is a ridiculously good actor. Like, I always think about him as a voice actor these days because I watch so much animation. But he's always great in everything he does. It did sort of feel a little bit like J.J. Abrams was unwriting the power of, like, Luke's sacrifice at the end of the last movie. Mm-hmm. But I do feel like the Luke character in real life would have wanted to say to Rey, hey, snap out of it, really. Like, don't, you're literally doing the thing that I did that turned out to have been wrong. Like, don't just be sad on an island alone. Like, it felt very in character, but it was also a little bit like, never mind that movie you just saw by that director you're critical of. I don't know. What do folks think about the way they handled Luke?
I'm still stuck on you saying he's a good actor. But,
oh, you thought it was bad?
No, I think he's fine, but I just, like, never really was moved by his acting throughout the time. I got distracted. No shade.
Damn.
Oh, man.
I've heard people complaining, like, oh, he's so bratty in the first movie. I'm like, yes, he is. He's a whiny teenager. That's the point. That's right. What's happening there. It's understandable that everyone is taken with Han. He is a whiny teenager because he's a whiny teenager. That's the character. Good God. Like, but whatever.
I feel like it's the same thing that happened with, like, Hayden Christensen as well. Like, everyone hated him, like, in, like, the, like, characterization of, like, Anakin and all that stuff. But it's like, he also was, like, an awful a-hole. Like, that's who he is. That's his character.
Yeah. Teenage boys, they're sometimes really need to be smacked.
Yeah.
They need to be smacked. Oh, what did folks think about the Knights of Ren? I had hoped that they didn't exist. Like, I know that when the first time I ever heard the words the Knights of Ren mentioned out loud, it had some sort of headline that was like, fan theory says, and I was like, oh my God, this sounds like something some incel boys made up, that the Knights of Ren exist. And then it became clear later on that, like, no, they actually are a thing in canon and not just some weird fever dream cooked up by some incel boys. But then they were in this movie, and I really was just like, damn, I was really hoping this wasn't a thing. But I did enjoy having them get their asses kicked, even if it was brief. I don't know. They were a very small thing to me. What did folks have any impressions around them?
I cared. Who were the guys or people in red whenever he was in Snoke's?
The Imperial Guard. Yeah.
I wanted to learn about those people because they were freaking awesome. And I was like, I just want to know who they are. And then the Knights of Ren, I feel like I didn't really get to see them doing anything nearly as cool. So, and that's another thing of like a missed opportunity. Like, if you're going to use them, use them. Like, show me they're worth being on this screen. Like, don't give me like brooding kind of people in masked like military uniforms. Give me like some cool, powerful moves.
So I think maybe we unless folks have other stuff, like I want to sort of conclude with a couple of like big picture questions. Does that sound good, guys?
Mm-hmm.
So, Star Wars is a movie that's come to be discussed in very political terms. We've the original series itself was about the Vietnam War in a lot of ways. Like, talking about Star Wars politically is not ahistoric or random. Like, the Ewoks were using fighting tactics that at least according to the filmmaker, were based off the Viet Cong. Like these are always have been political, and obviously, the bad guys are literally designed to look like Nazis. That's a political statement. But when I'm looking at the movies now, it's hard for me to not think about it with a question of like, well, what is the political utility of these movies now? Like, do I think that they have anything useful for kids? And to the extent that we have this movie that had a core group of 3 heroes, none of whom are white men, that like kids are going to identify with and like see themselves and see them getting along and learning with each other and being imperfect and growing, like that is pretty darn cool. And I'm really happy for the kids today for having that. But as I mentioned earlier, like there's a sort of difference where Star Wars is a little bit more focused on individuals, but it is also a story about the individuals taking on fascism and winning, and that you have to take on fascism regularly. You don't just defeat it once and have it go away. It keeps coming back. Do folks have any sort of political feelings about like what the movie means as like for like what is your sort of big takeaway about like the meaning of Star Wars as a story?
So my takeaway is, my initial fear on this last movie, and what I fear might come out of just generally, is that there seems to be like, what I feel like what happens with Kylo Ren's character, honestly, that arc is like, it kind of gives the impression of you can be an evil person and do evil things and commit mass murders and be an awful general person and being, and still be okay in the end, and still have people who are kind of like the complete opposite to you embrace you in the end. And I really hate that message, and I feel like we keep getting this message over and over and over again, and Star Wars is now doing it too, and it's really like it really irks part of my soul. But then you also have Rey, who shows that you can go through trials and build up community and make community like work for you in a way that like helps you like understand and grow and like learn to be a better person, and also have trials and not stay on a status quo and not be like, maybe that means like you're not a straight A student, maybe that means you're not like the most vocal person in the world, but you can still have these journeys and it still can lead you somewhere where you end up being the hero of your own fate, and you're not dictated on by where you started from. You end up there based on your choices as you grow as an individual. I love that story, but I really do have a really big like a fear of what happened with Kylo's story being the overarching end of what this what this means for this saga.
That was awesome. Thank you, Portia. Like, right on. Raf, what are your thoughts?
I'm a little concerned, I think. I feel like, especially with like the Disney coming in and the way it's so commercialized more than ever before, where it's become like the dark side and the light side have become like the Mets and the Yankees, or the Dodgers versus good and evil. It's like, when I remember playing the villain as a kid, I was playing the villain. I wasn't playing the other side of an issue. And I guess like there is so much to say about like teaching people about what something like restorative justice and these other things can be, and like personal evolution and those kind of things. What I can't get behind, or like what I'm alarmed by, is because of the commercialization of it. And I'm not sure if it's only entirely because of it, but I think so. And also the things that they rolled back in this situation, that it's feeding this narrative of, oh, everyone's just misunderstood and everyone has a different point of view, and maybe they're just economically insecure or this or that. Like, I feel those vibes being reinforced with it, and I think that's primarily because the people, it's probably nearly impossible to do art with a giant corporation breathing down your back, one that was headed by someone who was gladly in Trump's advisory council, and he refused to leave, which I think all of us were involved in, like pressuring him and them to leave successfully at a certain point. But we had to use Disney's own canon to do that, right? Because it didn't align with what they were doing. And I don't see how we can continue to pretend that Star Wars is going to be impervious to that. Because it's a corporation behind it, a very big one now, and B, because the people who are behind it, who are writing it, who are defending things or not, are people who don't have almost any analysis about racism or sexism or any kind of like oppression almost at all. These are all typically very often the same type of people in the same echo chamber with the same incomes. And so like that's just really concerning to me, that it's just becoming less and less clear, and more like this charade that we're like just another team.
Mm-hmm. I am so right there too. I whenever I see though, which side do you choose stuff in ads, which is always for kids' toys and like Happy Meals, like I want to scream, because it's not, exactly. It's not like, are you picking the Yankees or the Mets? Like, this isn't like Beatles versus Rolling Stones. This is, are you with the fascists or are you with the resistance? And that's not cute. And I think you're right. It's like a lot of the commercial concerns are the ones that are making them seem evil and equal. But wow. I want to thank you guys for joining me. This was exactly the conversation that I wanted us to have. Hooray. So let our listeners know where they can find you if they want to find out more about your work or to stalk you on social media, by which I generally just mean Twitter. Raphael, where can folks keep in touch with you?
I'm mostly on Twitter, Raphael Shimonov. That's where you'll find me.
And that's spelled SHIMUNOV.
Yeah.
Yes, excellent. And Portia, where can our folks find your work online?
I'm on Twitter. You can find me at Portia, PORSHEA _Obvi.
because it's obvious.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for joining me. And of course, as ever, I'm on Twitter a little too much at ELANA_Brooklyn, Ilana_Brooklyn. As I said, we will be covering Mandalorian soon. I'm also going to have stuff on Watchmen, and my V for Vendetta episode will be coming up shortly as well. Graphic Policy Radio, we have been working on improving our audio quality and tightening up our editing and making the best show we can. And so if you enjoy us, it would really be great to get a couple of new reviews on our iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever platform you use to listen to us. Rate us, give us a review, and it helps other people find the show and keeps it active. So, as we say at the end of every episode, keep it geeky.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.